Welcome to the first edition of Eagle Eyes Around the SEC, where we take a trip around the greatest conference in the nation. College football is back, ladies and gentlemen, and all 14 teams take the field this week. We'll be diving right into some of the biggest questions surrounding the conference going into the season, rank the schedules, and even make some game predictions. All that and more on the first ever episode of Around the SEC. I'm Mikayla Kelly, joined today by Zach Card and Connor King. Thank you guys for joining the show. How are you guys, and how excited are you that SEC football starts this weekend?
Oh, I'm thrilled. I can't wait. It's been a long time since we've had some football here on the Plains, and I just can't wait for the season to get going.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be back. Just happy to be here on the Plains.
I agree. I think this will be a very exciting season, and also the last season before the entire college football landscape as we know it changes completely. And obviously we're all personally excited to see Auburn play this Saturday at Jordan-Hare, but there are some big questions surrounding many other teams in the conference that I'd like to get into and kind of just hear what you guys think. I think one of, if not the biggest question for fans going into this season has been, who will be Alabama's starting quarterback? And not only who, but can they carry Alabama back to a championship following the departure of Heisman quarterback Bryce Young? The Tide is left with Jalen Milroe, a redshirt sophomore who played 3 games back in 2021, Notre Dame transfer Tyler Buchner, and redshirt freshman Ty Simpson. So who do you guys will take over as the true QB1 this season for Alabama?
Honestly, I don't think the quarterback really matters that much. Alabama's offensive line, they are young, but I think that they're one of the best offensive lines in the country. I also think their running game and Jace McClellan and Roydell Williams is very important as well. I don't think we're going to see this spread offense that Alabama's been running the past few years. I do think the starter will be Jalen Milroe, as he's a running quarterback, and Alabama's offensive line will carry the boats for most of the season. I don't think that Tyler Buchner has enough to be Alabama's starting quarterback. Even though he transferred over from Notre Dame, I really just don't think it's much of a competition. I think Milroe will be the starting quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. I think Buckner's definitely the last option for the Tide. But with you said, I don't think they're going to run a spread offense that much anymore. I agree. I don't think that quarterback should be that big of a concern for Alabama because the sum of their parts is so great. I like Ty Simpson the most, though. Saban has been asking them to force them to play them, force the coaches to play the quarterbacks. And I think that Ty Simpson has the most upside, especially as a pocket passer. And he's got a little athleticism, get out of the pocket. Maybe not as much as Jalen Milroe, but he's got some athleticism to help him escape some pressure and put Alabama in a better position.
I agree. I think Milroe will probably come in as the starter just in regards to experience. He's played under Bryce Young. He's played for the Tide. He led the team to a victory against A&M. But I do think it'll be a little bit rotational in the first game. But let's not forget that Alabama plays Texas in week 2. So the uncertainty right now might be a problem for them in week 2, and I can see them potentially losing that game in week 2 to Texas. So despite the uncertainty at this position, is Alabama a true championship contender? And let me remind you that if the Crimson Tide does not win the national title, it will be the first time since Saban arrived in Tuscaloosa in 2007 that Alabama goes 3 years without a national title.
Yeah, I think they're still definitely a championship contender. It's a huge testament to Saban and that the dynasty that he's built over there, that they haven't not won a championship in 3 years since that 2007 date. But despite all the struggles that quarterback may be for them this year, I think, as I said earlier, the sum of their parts is too great to not be considered a contender.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think every year Alabama's a national championship contender. There's just no doubt about it. When you have Nick Saban on the sideline, there's just no way you can't consider them to be a contender. Another stat that I think is really important, we were just talking about how there's a lot of uncertainty at quarterback. I think that knowing that 7 out of the 8 years they've won a national championship, a first-time quarterback starter has been their quarterback, that's really important, and it shows how good of a coach Nick Saban is and how he can coach these quarterbacks up.
I personally don't see it shaking out for them this season. I definitely think there's a path where they win the West. They're playing in Atlanta in December, but I just don't see them as a playoff contender this season. I mean, it's August, and there's quarterback uncertainty, and they have a tough stretch in their schedule down the line. So, but again, you can never bet against the Crimson Tide, never. So we'll see. And the bar for success is definitely higher at Alabama, and failure looks a lot different to them than most schools. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with our friends across the state. And how about the #1 reigning back-to-back national champions, the Georgia Bulldogs? Can Carson Beck maintain the Bulldogs' offensive success, and is UGA a championship team? Can they have the first three-peat since the 1930s? What do you guys think?
So I think that if he plays by the same system that Kirby Smart put Stetson Bennett in, I think absolutely. I don't really know if it's up to Carson Beck whether or not this offense will succeed. One thing that's really important to note is that almost all of Georgia's running backs are hurt right now. During fall camp, they've kind of been in and out of practice, and there's one senior running back that's actually out for the season now. That's really important. Georgia relies on their run game a lot, and their success in the 2 national championships was their running backs. I think that Carson Beck, if he stays true to what Kirby Smart tells him to do and doesn't try to show out and be this crazy athletic Heisman contender, they'll be okay. They're one of the best teams in college football, and they have one of the best defenses to ride on, so I think they'll be all right.
I agree. I think their defense is too good to discount them at all, even if their offense may not be as good with Carson Beck under the helm, or at the helm instead of Stetson Bennett. Stetson was just a leader on that team. He knew what he wanted to do with the offense every time the offense took the field on a drive. And I'm just not sure Carson Beck's going to have that same command over the field like he did and the same knowledge of the offense in his first year under Kirby Smart. But with that being said, Smart is an unbelievable coach and pretty much always puts his quarterbacks in a position to succeed. So I think UGA is still going to be a force to be reckoned with and will make a run at that 3rd national championship in a row.
Yes, while he's no Stetson Bennett, we've seen that Carson Beck can be productive. Last season, he threw for 310 yards and 4 touchdowns. And Georgia's got some great returners coming back. You got tight end Brock Bowers, one of the best players in the nation, one of the best offensive lines in the nation. And Kirby Smart has really built up the program to be able to replenish, reload the talent that they lose in the NFL draft. When it comes to a three-peat, though, I am a little skeptical because, to be honest, Georgia's schedule this season is a cakewalk. I think they'll just blow through everyone, win the East. But with that comes, in December, you're finally playing teams that are really high caliber, and will they be able to keep up, or will it be too late by that point? Jumping into coaches now, obviously in college football, there are always coaches in danger of losing their jobs, but what SEC coach is in the hot seat right now? Is there a potential future where Texas A&M has to bite the bullet and sign a fat $80 million goodbye check to Jimbo Fisher if the Aggies have yet another unproductive season?
I think that Jimbo Fisher is easily the main SEC hot seat right now. It seems like my entire childhood growing up, it seems like A&M has just been this super hyped up team in the preseason, top 10 team, and they've never delivered. I think that Jimbo Fisher needs to win at least 8 games this year. I still think that'll be not good enough. I do think A&M will keep him if they get to a bowl game, though. Also, A&M has one of the best rosters in college football. They continuously have a top 5, top 10 recruiting class. They did really good in the portal this year. They lost a lot of guys to the portal as well, but they should be a top 3 team in the West, if not the best team in the West, with how good this roster is.
Yeah, I agree. They bring in top 5 classes almost every year in the recruiting season. And last season they went 5-7 and 2-6 in SEC play. That's just, you can't do that if you're bringing in multiple top 5 classes after one of another. You have to do something better than that. But I think that $70 or $80 million price tag is just too much to give a coach. I think you got to weigh him out for another year or two, cut a couple million off of that total, and kind of ride him out as you can.
Yep.
I just think we've seen this story before. They came in last season, everyone expected them to be really good. Obviously, they've spent a ton of money on Jimbo Fisher to coach this team. I think that's really the only reason he still has this job. But like we said, they finished last in SEC West, went 5-7, and I just think that if they're this unproductive again this season, I think it might just be time to get rid of him and take the financial hit. And who knows, potentially on September 23rd when Auburn travels to College Station, that if they don't win that game, I think that could easily seal his fate right there. Last December, former Mississippi State head coach Mike Leach sadly and unexpectedly passed away. So what does the post-Mike Leach era look like for the Bulldogs over in Starkville?
Mike Leach was just an absolute legend. He coached football in such a unique way that we've never seen. He was one of the weirdest spoken people I think we've ever met. The way that he took press conferences and everything, and we'll miss him in the college football world. But Zach Arnett is a good successor for him, in my opinion. He is a football guru. He really understands the game. He's a young guy, and I think he'll be able to connect with those players really well. I think that they're on the up. They may be in the last spot or last two spots at SEC West this year, but I think in the future they're a team going in the right direction under Zach Arnett.
Yeah, I think that Mississippi State has a really good future ahead, and this year they're not going to be too bad. They have 18 confirmed senior starters, which is a lot considering the other SEC teams with a lot of new guys on all sides of the ball. And Will Rogers is still there too. He's a great quarterback, and he's going to keep on Mike Leach's legacy. So I don't think the Bulldogs will have too bad of a season this year.
Kind of following what you guys said, I think the success of this team will be determined by how well Zach Arnett can transition from defensive coordinator to head coach. The media, most people have them going last in the West. I personally don't see that happening. I do think they have a deeper reason to play for this season than just the game itself. And let's not forget, they still have Will Rogers, a great quarterback. I think probably a top 5 SEC quarterback at least. I just think he'll have to adjust a little bit more, utilize the run game a little bit more, so we'll see what happens. Speaking of quarterbacks, it's a new era in terms of quarterbacks in the SEC. The conference lost 5 quarterbacks to the 2023 NFL Draft, including Stetson Bennett, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, and Hendon Hooker. So who will rise as the top SEC quarterback? Is it possible that it's between Arkansas's KJ Jefferson and LSU's Jaden Daniels? And can either of them potentially lead their team to the top?
So I'm a big fan of KJ Jefferson. I have for a really long time. Whenever they beat Ole Miss in overtime with that crazy swing pass, I knew that he was a really good quarterback. I respect him for staying at Arkansas. I do not think they will be anywhere near the top of the West, but I think KJ Jefferson is the best quarterback in the SEC. Jaden Daniels is also a really good quarterback, but there's just too many moving parts over there at LSU. They have a great wide receiver room and a great running back room. It's going to be tough for him to shine as much as KJ can over there at Arkansas. So I do have KJ Jefferson on top of the SEC for quarterbacks.
So I don't have either KJ Jefferson or Jaden Daniels as the best quarterback in the SEC by the end of the season. I think KJ Jefferson and Jaden Daniels are fantastic quarterbacks. I like Jaden Daniels preferably over the two of them. I think LSU has a better chance to go further. He has a better chance for a better year than KJ Jefferson does. But I think Spencer Rattler by the end of the season will be one of the better, if not the best, quarterback in the SEC. He's coming with a lot of hype in the past years. He was the front runner in 2021 for the Heisman when he was at Oklahoma, and things didn't go exactly to plan. But we saw the last 2 games of the regular season last year. He put up amazing games against Tennessee and Clemson. South Carolina's first 2 top 10 wins in a row ever. He threw for over 400 yards and recorded a school record 6 touchdowns against Tennessee, and we know how good Tennessee was last year. I think that he's in store for a pretty big year.
I could definitely see a world where Spencer Rattler really steps up, but he's got to do it. He's got to step up. This is really a season to do it, and I do agree. I think LSU is more equipped to win, but I don't know. I think KJ Jefferson definitely flies under the radar. He's a dual threat quarterback and definitely the core of the Razorback offense. In back-to-back seasons, he completed 20 passing touchdowns with 5 or fewer interceptions, and in that time, he also ran for 15 rushing scores. So he's a huge threat to defenses. We'll see if he can really carry Arkansas far, or maybe they'll just sit back in the middle as they typically do. Unfortunately for them. Now, just for fun, let's just go around and make our way too early bold prediction of who will be playing in December in Atlanta for the SEC championship. And not only that, do you think an SEC team will be playing for the Natty this year?
I got a really bold prediction here. I think it's going to be Bama and Georgia yet again. I think that these two are just the 2 best teams in the conference. Georgia, I think they're just going to cruise through the East. There's not really anyone that can stop them in the East this year. So I think they're a no-brainer to get to Atlanta. Out of the West, it's a little bit of a toss-up between Bama and LSU. For me, it goes up to their head-to-head game. Who wins that one? For me, I think Bama's going to come out of that one, but I could see either one.
Yeah, I agree. I also have Georgia and Alabama in the SEC championship. It's really hard to pick against Georgia when they played nobody until week 11 at Tennessee, and I still think they'll take that game as well. Alabama, on the other end, I think they want revenge. They want to beat LSU. They want to beat Tennessee. I don't think anybody will stop them unless we're in the postseason against Georgia or in the playoff. I really think that Georgia and Alabama will both make the playoff too. So those are the two dominant teams in the SEC this year, just like usual.
I'm going to have to agree. I also have Georgia and Alabama. Georgia, they're the beasts of the East. There's really no one that's going to take them down unless maybe Tennessee has some standout year, but I don't think they're the same volunteer team that they were last year. So I see Georgia cruising right through. And Bama's Bama. They have a lot to play for. I think we'll see them there in December. But here's my thing with these two teams, and probably my hot take is that I don't see an SEC team in the national championship this year. And while I think Georgia and Alabama are still the top of the SEC, I still think that they're weaker than they were last year, and that's why I just don't see either of them making it to the national championship. And in the Big Ten alone, you've got Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, a team like Florida State, maybe Notre Dame coming in. You got USC, maybe Clemson coming back. So it's real competitive across the country, and I just don't see an SEC team making it to the national championship this year. What about you guys?
I think that it might be a Georgia and Alabama national championship. So.
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue with that too. I just think that the competition that the SEC has within the conference, I think that throughout the regular season, the SEC teams are better prepared for the playoff than any other conferences. They go through the gauntlet of the schedule, especially if you're Bama coming out of the West. You play all these teams every single week that are very good. Pac-12 doesn't have the same thing. They have more difference at the top and the bottom. I think that all across the SEC, you're playing much better opponents, and I think that sets us up for national championship appearances. I think that there'll only be one SEC team in the playoff this year. Whoever comes out of Atlanta, I think, will be the only one in, just because Big Ten, Big 12, and Pac-12 all have great teams that can make it.
I agree with that. I don't think we'll be seeing two SEC teams in the playoffs this year. And I know it's a hot take to say none of them are going to the championship this year, and my opinion could easily change a few weeks from now. When we come back, we'll talk some Auburn football. You're watching Around the SEC. Welcome back to Around the SEC. It's a new era down here on the plains, the Hugh Freeze era. The Tigers are hoping for a positive new beginning coming off a brutal 5-7 2022 season. Despite losing some key playmakers to the NFL draft, there's still some talented veterans back this season, as well as some exciting newcomers. I mean, Coach Freeze really went to work in the transfer portal this offseason, and the Orange and Blue faithful expect to see an immediate impact. Which returner and newbie are you guys most excited to see play this season?
So I think for me, DJ James is the most exciting returner for me. He is just an absolutely lockdown corner. He showed that all last year. And he's the third highest Pro Football Focus graded returning cornerback in the SEC behind Alabama's Kool-Aid McKinstry and Ole Miss's Deshaun Gaddy, who transferred from North Texas. I think that he's just going to lock it down in the secondary, and he's who I'm looking forward to watching.
Yeah, I have Jarquez Hunter as my returner. I think he shined last year. He looked great, and even though he missed a little bit of practice during camp this year, I think he's just fine. He's one of the most athletic people I've ever seen, and I think he's going to run all over everybody this season.
I agree with both of those. I also had Jarquez Hunter, and just because he's put up numbers since he came in as a freshman, but Tank was always at the forefront, and so now this is really his season to take over, stand out as a top SEC running back. And I think it's safe to say that this might be his last season on the Plains. So I think we really just need to sit back and enjoy him. He's a really dynamic player, and I'm excited to see him have his real standout year.
So for my newcomer of the year, I got to go with Shane Hooks, the graduate transfer from Jackson State. Just a huge wide receiver, 6'3", big body. He had 66 receptions for 775 yards and 10 touchdowns last season. And we saw that one-handed catch he made in the scrimmage. He is going to make plays all over the place, nicknamed Hollywood. So I think you guys know what we're going to see when he comes and hits the field in the fall.
Yeah, and I have the guy that's going to be throwing the passes to Shane Hooks. I have Peyton Thorne. I think that he's going to make an immediate impact. I knew that as soon as I named him the starter, I knew that he was going to be our leader of the team. He seems to be that way. He looks great at fall camp, and I'm just excited to see what he can do and to have a real shotgun quarterback for us. It's been a while since we've had one of those.
I'm personally really excited to see Shane Hooks as well. He's really been standing out in the scrimmages. He's a big guy, made a huge impact at Jackson State in the last few seasons he's played there. And I think the wide receiver room is something we've kind of really struggled in, never had really a true weapon. And I think this will be our go-to guy, and I'm really excited to see him. Hugh Freeze came out in his press conference on Monday and said he doesn't believe in depth charts, but Shane Hooks was there in bold, no asterisks, no rotation. I think he is our guy, and I'm really excited to see him play this season. Jumping over to the quarterback position, Auburn has also been one of those schools that's been having a quarterback battle all summer, but Peyton Thorne, the Michigan State transfer, has officially been named the starter for Week 1 over Robbie Ashford. So do you think Thorne will pull completely ahead as the true starter for the entire season, or will Robbie stay in the mix?
I think Peyton Thorne will be the starter the entire season. I think Robbie will have his time to shine. Last year, it seems like Robbie kind of just got thrown out onto the field and said throw the ball. I think that it'll take Hugh Freeze another year to coach Robbie up to be a full, complete quarterback. But Peyton Thorne came over here from Michigan State. He's an older guy. He's a leader. And I think that he will be the starter and he'll lead us to success this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think Robbie will get in the mix, get some play time. He'll hit the field a good amount just because of his ability to extend plays, avoid pressure and all that. But I think Peyton Thorne will show his maturity, how much he knows about football, about the offense. He's going to really command the field and flourish under Hugh Freeze. In 2 years ago with Michigan State, when they had a run game, he was fantastic. And I think it's safe to say that Auburn will have a run game this year with Jarquez Hunter, Damari Alston, Shane Battie, and whoever else in that fantastic room that I'm missing. I think that he's going to flourish this year, and I think that he'll be our starting quarterback through the end of the season.
I agree. Well, early in the season, in the games that don't matter as much, I think you throw Robbie in here and there simply just because of the speed that kid has on him. But I think Peyton Thorne starts every game. He's obviously more seasoned, and he was named a captain, so that goes to show that the players in the locker room see him as a leader, and I think that's great to have at the quarterback position. So I think he starts every game, and it'll be good for Robbie to have someone to kind of play under, develop under. He's still young, so. This Saturday at 2:30 Central Time, the Tigers kick off their season against UMass inside Jordan-Hare Stadium. I think this should be an easy win for Auburn, but you never know, any given Saturday. However, it is important to note that UMass is already 1-0 after a Week 0 victory over New Mexico State, another team Auburn faces down the road this season. And I know, Connor, you watched this game, so what is your comments from that game?
Well, my dad, he actually played at New Mexico State. He was a DB back a long time ago, and I watched the full game. I think that both teams are awful. There's no way around it. New Mexico State didn't have an answer for UMass defense, and UMass offense really isn't that good. If UMass scores over 10 points on us, then there's a real problem for our defense. I think that we should easily take care of UMass this week.
Yeah, I don't think we should go too crazy about them winning their 4th game in 4 years. Let's settle down a little bit just because they beat New Mexico State. I think we should roll over them.
I agree. I think it'll be an easy dub for the orange and blue. But before we take a break, what record do you predict Auburn finishes with at the end of the season?
So I think I'm going to go right down the middle. I think of what everyone around the fan base is thinking. I'm thinking 8-4. I think we're going to be a decent team in the SEC. We'll go about 500 in the SEC. We'll win most, if not all, of our non-conference games. I think we should win all of our non-conference games, but you never know. So I think we're going to be a pretty good bowl team at 8-5.
Yeah, I agree. I think we'll be 8-4 as well. Sadly, I think.
Or 8-4. Yeah, sorry.
After the bowl game too, we don't have a good record of winning bowl games recently. So I think we dropped Georgia, we dropped LSU, dropped Bama, and dropped the toss-up game between A&M or Arkansas or Ole Miss. I do think all those games are winnable though too. So we'll see, but I think reasonably it's 8-4.
I'm going to go with the inverse of last season and say 7-5, just because we haven't played a game yet, and I just need to see what kind of team we're working with this season before I can give a true judgment. I mean, we got a tough schedule, and there's a lot of games that could really swing either way. So stay tuned if my opinion might change, but right now I'm saying 7-5. But when we come back, we're ranking schedules. Who has the easiest? Who has the toughest? You're going to have to wait and see when we come back. You're watching Around the SEC. Welcome back to Around the SEC. Now let's talk schedules. Let's start out with the easiest. Who was dealt the easiest schedule in the SEC season? Zach, what do you think?
I think it's Georgia. They're the only team in the SEC East that doesn't play Georgia, the best team in the SEC East. Everyone else in the SEC is kind of a cakewalk. Their non-conference games aren't good either. UT Martin, Ball State, and UAB. I say the best one out of those is UAB. They're in the right direction under a new coach, but it's still his first year. So I think they're just going to steamroll everyone. You said it earlier, they don't play anyone until week 11.
Exactly, yeah. They play Tennessee and I guess Florida or South Carolina to test for them. There's nothing. It's a cakewalk, and if Georgia's not 12-0, then there's a problem.
Here's my take, and shocker, it's no different from what these two just said. I think it's hands down Georgia, and also why I believe they'll be in Atlanta playing for the SEC title come December. For lack of better terms, they have a cupcake schedule, in my opinion. I mean, you start the season with 4 home games against Tennessee Martin, Ball State, South Carolina, and UAB. Easy money for them. Then you come to Auburn and most likely win. And the only true potential threat, like you guys said, is at Tennessee, but this is not the Volunteer team we saw last year. And as far as I see it, the Bulldogs have a path carved to the SEC championship. And like I mentioned earlier, I think this is why I think they'll struggle come postseason, because they won't have played teams at that caliber until later in the season. So that's where I see that hindering them in the long run. Now, who has the toughest schedule this season? Because my vote goes to Florida. And it's quite ironic that Swamp Kings on Netflix was just released, because the Gators of 2023 will be hopping on the struggle bus. While most SEC teams have the luxury of opening against a weak opponent, Florida is just not that lucky this year, kicking off their season against number 14 Utah, and then bookend their season against number 8 Florida State, a team I think will really excel this season. Not to mention a meeting with the number 1 Georgia Bulldogs and a trip to Death Valley. It's not looking good for Bill Napier and the Gators. Who do you guys think have some tough schedules this season?
I actually have South Carolina this year. I think they have one of the toughest schedules every year, but opening up with North Carolina is tough. North Carolina is a top 3 team in the ACC. And they also have Georgia, they have Clemson, they have Tennessee. They have some really tough outs. I think that at the end of the day, they'll win some of those games, because they did last year. They beat Tennessee and Clemson, but it's still very tough.
Yeah, I got to go in the SEC West. I've been talking about how good the SEC West is all game, and I got to go with Mississippi State. They play all the big dogs in the SEC West, and then you add Arizona and Southern Miss to the non-conference. Those are 2 pretty good FBS teams. And then Western Michigan is the last one. They're probably going to be at the bottom of the MAC this year, but yet again, another FBS team instead of an FCS team that will test them.
To end today's episode, let's do some game predictions. I truly believe that for 11 of the teams in the SEC, it'll be smooth sailing this week. But for the other 3, Florida, South Carolina, and LSU, they're in for some interesting and potentially competitive matchups. First up, Florida plays number 14 Utah tomorrow night in Salt Lake City. The Gators did upset the Utes last season, but I just don't foresee an upset this time around. They have a low production quarterback in Graham Mertz, and Utah's defense plays very physical, so I'm picking the Utah Utes to win.
I have Utah as well. I think even though Utah's third-string quarterback starting tomorrow night, it doesn't matter. Utah's defense is shut out, and they've returned a lot of production from last year. And Florida's just not a complete team. Graham Mertz hasn't shown me anything. In every video I've seen from fall camp, it seems like the receiver's doing more work than he is. So I have the Utes as well.
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue with that. Utah is probably going to come in and roll over them, honestly. I don't think Florida's very good, and I think we'll see it as the season goes on, too, that they're not a very good SEC football team.
Then a little bit of a rivalry matchup in South Carolina versus number 21 UNC. The Tar Heels have a potential Heisman quarterback in Drake May, some argue. The Gamecocks do have the home field advantage, and while I think it will be a close contest, I'm putting my money on UNC. I do think this will be a great test for Spencer Rattler to step up and prove himself not to be a fluke, though.
Yeah, I went with the Spencer Rattler take earlier today that he'll be the best quarterback by the end of the year, and I'm going to stick with that. So South Carolina, I think, gets the year started off right, with the dub against UNC. I think he'll have a pretty good game, start the year off right, silence some of the haters to begin the year, and sail off for a pretty good year.
I agree. I think this game is going to be a shootout, but North Carolina's defense and secondary is some of the worst in the country. I think, like Mikayla said, Spencer Rattler will have a really good game and kind of show everybody that he's a really good quarterback and one of the best in the SEC. So I also have the Gamecocks.
And then lastly, the game of the week, the one I'm personally anticipating, has to be the matchup against number 5 LSU and number 8 Florida State in Tallahassee if the weather permits, which I think it should by come Sunday. I think the tropical storm hurricane will have passed by then. The Tigers of the Bayou have many returners, including Jaden Daniels, and many returners from that same team that defeated Alabama last season, but the Seminoles are loaded with talent on both sides of the ball. I think this could swing either way, and it's going to go to the team who plays with the most grit. And I'm going against the odds potentially and picking the Florida State Seminoles to win this game. Either way, these are both teams to watch and potential playoff contenders.
Yeah, this is one of the most exciting games we're going to see all season. I think LSU will come out with the win, especially after last year and how they won, driving all the way down the field just to miss a PAT to tie the game to go to overtime. I think LSU has a big chip on their shoulder from last year. They were a really good team. They just dropped some games early, like the Florida State game. I do think Florida State's one of the best teams in the country. I think they'll be on top of the ACC, but I do think LSU will come away with the win.
I agree with you, Connor. I think Florida State's going to be a good team this year, and they're going to be an even better team in future years. But I think we got to give them some time, another year or two, before I'm comfortable putting them in that top 4 for the playoff conversation. So personally, I think LSU is going to come away with that win. I think that they're just a more complete team, better quarterback with Jaden Daniels. I just think all around LSU is going to be the better team.
Well, regardless of what happens this weekend, it's going to be a fun weekend, and I am so excited that college football is back. And that is all we have for today's show. Huge thank you again to Zach Card and Connor King for coming on and sharing their thoughts. I had a great time. This has been Mikayla Kelly. See you next time on Around the SEC.